Israel is ever closer to another election. It would be the fourth one in 2 years. A preliminary date has been set for March 16, 2021. A majority of Israeli lawmakers voted to dissolve parliament in a preliminary reading.
Unfortunately, and I'm saying the truth, Benny Gantz reneged on the agreements between us, and this decision is dragging the state of Israel into elections. And I think it happened, and this isn't a secret, because of an internal fight in his party. He reneged because of his insistence to continue giving Nissenkorn against the coalition agreement to advance a dictatorship of left-wing bureaucrats, and these bureaucrats are ruining the will of the people.
This brings Israel closer to its fourth round of elections in 2 years. Disagreements over the 2020 budget have caused the latest political turmoil. The main issue is that the Israeli coalition cabinet can't really agree on anything. Israeli ministers accuse Israel's prime minister of lying and sidelining his demands, in particular, a proposed budget, the same budget that hasn't been passed. Another election means Israelis have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for it. Israel's elections are costly. They run upwards of $400 million per election. About 30% of that money, according to Channel 12, will go to party funding. Another 20% will go to party member loans. Israel has had 3 so far in less than 2 years. According to the Manufacturers Association of Israel, the latest 3 elections cost Israelis $3.8 billion. This calculation factors in the expense of election days that require businesses to close for the day. In Israel, any election day is a national holiday to facilitate voting. If businesses still open, according to the Israeli law, they need to pay their employees 200% of their normal salary for the day. The Calculation Manufacturers Association of Israel also includes party campaign budgets funded by Israel and the cost of operating the Central Elections Committee, which oversees the electoral process. Furthermore, with caretaker cabinets in place since December 2018, Israel's economic policies have been on hold, while the debt increased and costs continued. Costs incurred by the ongoing political maneuvering and ultimate stalemate that exist following the latest election results may be compounded by yet another election soon. The lack of a budget law has hurt the most vulnerable worst of all. The lack of a state budget has left working parents, especially lower income ones, with no immediate solutions to the problem.
You know, it's a lot of money, but I have to be frank with you and the audience. I want to say that this will bring problems and more crises to the citizens of Israel, but it's not the main crisis in Israel. We can see now this cost of the new campaign and the election will make the crisis wider from one side and deeper from other side. It means that we are already in the crisis, and the election will bring more problems and to make this crisis wider and deeper. You know, everybody, that the election, the fourth one in less than 2 years, is out of the complicated crisis politically, economically, and the health and the corruption crisis in Israel. It's a reflex of this crisis. There is a new phenomena of this fourth election, different than the last 3 elections. In the last 3 elections, the main discussion were between the right-wing parties, Netanyahu and the Likud, and from the other side, the center and left forces and parties in, for example, Gantz and Labour Party and the Meretz and the common list in the Arab side. But this election is not between these two forces, the right and from one side and the center left in the other side. Now the discussion, the main fight is between the right parties from the other side, other right parties, between the right parties together. And this is a new phenomena, wasn't in all the history of Israel from the first election on 1949 till now.
On social media, the conversation was tense. Philippe says now Israeli elections coming up and have to watch all this over retard stuff again. Likud will win again. Benjamin says he's Israeli. The elections are not a big deal. Netanyahu is facing elections also. It's all a ploy. Yonah says Israeli elections are almost officially back for the fourth time in 2 years. Preliminary date of March 16 set. This is the timing Blue and White wanted and not later in the spring post-vaccination that Likud wanted. Though not clear, Blue and White will do any better.
כן, זה משהו שעלה בכל בחירות, כל פעם מזכירים את זה, וזה כואב. כאילו עכשיו נגיד דיברו על זה שזה כסף שהולך לצאת מתוך כספים שילכו לאנשים כרגע בקשיים כלכליים, אנשים שמחוץ לבית, שכבר חיים ברחוב, וכואב, כואב לשמוע שבגלל הפילוג בעם אנחנו סובלים, באמת סובלים.
בחירות עולות הרבה כסף, אני לא יודע כמה בדיוק, וברור שלאור הקורונה יש אתגרים ויש מקומות שבהם הכסף נדרש יותר מאשר מערכה פוליטית נוספת.
דבר אחר חוץ מבחירות, בחירות חוזרות וחוזרות וחוזרות, אבל יש לנו מציאות פוליטית כזאת שמאלצת אותנו לעשות את זה שוב, וחבל.
אין לדעת, המפה הפוליטית בישראל משתנה כל הזמן, ובאמת נראה שדברים הולכים כל פעם להיות אחרת, ויכול להיות שדברים לא יהיו אחרת.
רק שינוי בשיטת הבחירה שקיימת אצלנו, רק שינוי יכול להועיל, להביא איזשהו שינוי. שאנחנו עושים כל פעם את אותן פעולות, והם בעצם מגיעים לאותן תוצאות. שיסוע ודברים שאי אפשר לגשר עליהם. פשוט פערים מטורפים.
פחות טוב, והליכודיות החברתית נפגעה, ולכן מערכת בחירות נוספת עם כל האמוציות שבה עשויה לגרום לעוד קרע והגדלת הקרע ופגיעה במרקם החיים.
It should be quite clear that the Israeli economy is going to pay, and is already paying, a very heavy price for having a fourth elections in 2 years. But what many people overlook is the moral, psychological, and the motivational damage that is being caused. Because there's a large number of people from the Israeli middle class. And it doesn't really matter if it's center left or center right, who still believe that Israel is a Western, democratic, Zionist, normal state. And they still believe in the institutions of this state. And what they are discovering, or will discover, is that on top of the pyramid sits a man who will do everything in his ability to remain in power and will subvert the economic and political and justice system of the country. He will undermine it to achieve his goal. At the moment, Israel's debt lies at 14.5% of its GDP. Unemployment is at 20%. Poverty is at 29%. The Israelis don't need new elections at this time that will cost $400 million. What they need is good governance. And they need a budget, because there hasn't been a budget for 2020, nor for 2021. Nevertheless, elections are being held. And that is due to Benjamin Netanyahu's insistence on having a one-year budget plan. Netanyahu insisted on having a one-year budget plan, although he agreed to have a two-year budget plan earlier, because he wanted to have absolute control over the situation.
Israelis are upset about this because, according to KAN, the same troublemakers and lawmakers and officials in the Israeli cabinet and Knesset who are calling for a fourth election are the ones who benefit and are in some way rewarded for such political standoffs. And now they're going to get a reward for trying to convince Israelis to pick them again using their own tax money. Many of the members in the Knesset and the cabinet have been there running for their seats since the first election out of 3 seemingly failed ones. Israelis have lost confidence in them. It seems that no matter how much money is spent on their campaigns and how much fiscal funding they receive courtesy of Israeli taxpayers, they can't even pass a budget that will allow Israelis and Israel in general to function. Israelis believe that this is what the regime wanted. A fourth election looms because it is the only mechanism available to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to call new elections. For Netanyahu, a fourth race in under 2 years would have him not cede his office in November 2021 to his rival-turned-partner, Military Minister Benny Gantz. Netanyahu and Gantz have been circling each other for months. Netanyahu has been seeking to escape the clauses of his coalition agreement. Gantz has been struggling to hold him to it, and the budget has served as the main leverage in that fight. This leaves the Israeli public to be the outcasts in all of this, while they bear the biggest brunt. Hence, protesters, which are at their 28th week of protests, are calling for the downfall of the regime simply because they have had enough.
Means the most of the citizens of Israel are the main loser. But if we take it in the between parties and politically, we can see that Gantz and the Labour Party, it means the center and left, who were inside the coalition government, they will be the main loser as the political parties. The second loser will be Netanyahu himself, not the right wing as a political platform, but as the struggle against the corruption of Netanyahu. You know, and everybody knows that he is facing 3 corruption cases in the court, and he will be the main. They didn't reach to this budget because they know that the budget must bring a new hard decisions against the most of the citizens and the businesses out of the situation. They connect that with the political crisis in Israel and with the personal crisis of Netanyahu himself toward the corruption cases which he faced this time. For this reason, the budget issue is a symptom of the deep and wide, multiple and complicated crisis which Israel facing. This complicated crisis in Israel since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 wasn't in this thing. But there is a part of this crisis where something the same. I want to remember, let's remember together, for example, if we are talking about the political crisis, we saw a political crisis before, like what was in Barak on 1999 in Camp David. And it was a big political crisis in that time that was in Israel. If we are talking about the economical crisis, we can see two main crises in the history in economics. One, it was in 1985, and the second in 2008.
On social media, the conversation was tense. Classical Lib asks, how many ex-Likudniks have created a new party because Bibi pushed them out? 10 or something like that, right? Noah says Israel needs a new party, but not with the same old collection of egomaniacs. Michael jokingly says, due to the directives against large gatherings, maybe there should be a directive that no political party can have more than 10 candidates.
כמו כל דבר שמגיע מכספי מיסים, אנחנו משלמים על זה בסוף, ובאמת יש תחושה של איזה ניתוק מסוים, שההנהגה כבר לא מרגישה מחוברת אל העם שלה, שאנחנו כבר הרבה זמן משלמים בעד הבחירות האלה, ומרגיש שהפוליטיקאים לא מסכימים לעשות את הפשרות בשבילנו כדי לייצר ממשלה.
יכול להיות שאם ישנו את שיטת הבחירות, הדברים ישתנו, אבל כרגע, אם אנחנו ממשיכים להצביע באותה דרך, הכל ימשיך להיות אותו דבר. זאת אומרת, אי אפשר לצפות לקבל תוצאה אחרת שממשיכים באותה שיטה. זאת אומרת, איזשהו שינוי צריך להיות פה.
אני חושש שלא נגיע להכרעה ואנחנו נאלץ להיגרר לבחירות חמישיות ואולי יותר מכך. בסוף מי שמשלם על הבחירות זה התושבים, זה האזרחים שמשלמים מיסים כחוק והם יצטרכו לשלם את זה גם ברמה הכלכלית וגם ברמה החברתית, הפגיעה במרקם החיים החברתי במדינת ישראל.
The government don't care about the citizens in Israel, and we feel all the corruption in the government taking us down, and Israel is a proud country. We are proud people who try to save our free and democrat-only country in the Middle East. And because of this, the people of Israel is arising against the government.
What took place within the Israeli parliament, most recently, was that there was a vote to postpone reaching a decision regarding the budget. And while historically and most recently there's been a very strong opposition to Prime Minister Netanyahu from the center and from the left, now there's been a rebellion from the right, and there were members of the ruling Likud party, of all parties, who actually quit and either joined a new party, or people from the right who were surprised by voting against the proposition. And this is what is enabling a fourth elections. So in fact, there is a growing number of people who believe that they can unseat Netanyahu and remove him, and believe that they could serve as better prime ministers. And it is their personal drive that is causing Israel to go for a fourth election. The reason elections are being held on such a frequent basis in Israel is due to the fact that there isn't a clear consensus. Israeli society is deeply fragmented and divided. Various political parties are pushing in various different directions. Due to the fact that Israel is a so-called democracy, because it's democracy for Jews only, but it's a parliamentary democracy, various parties can pull out when they wish and therefore bring down the coalition once a majority is not secured. And that gives increasing power to smaller political parties. The polarization within Israel is getting stronger and deeper, and elections are therefore being held on a more frequent basis as various parties and figures split, and even within these splits there are various new splits.
To make matters even worse, in a recent speech, Israeli military minister Benny Gantz told Israelis on live national TV that he knew Netanyahu is a serial promise breaker, and that Netanyahu lied to Israelis and did not lie to Benny Gantz, even though he formed a coalition with him. So-called Knesset opposition leader Yair Lapid said citizens shared the feeling that they lost control over their lives. The lack of budget for 2020 has contributed to hardships and cutbacks for Israelis, amid unemployment estimated at over 20%. It seems that as the new year looms, so does another election for Israel. The same parties and the same players are on the table. The only thing new would be the money that would have went to a 2020 budget. Now, it remains to be seen if a budget would ever get passed. This, all the while Israelis suffer. Here is the news making the press in Israel. Ynet News. Israel's malls warn they will not close during new coronavirus restrictions. The operators of Israel's malls said that they would not close their doors again if instructed to do so, as part of tighter measures to reduce the rising coronavirus infection rate. Haaretz. Ministries will be forced to cut their budgets in January by about a quarter of planned levels, a total of 10 billion shekels or $3.1 billion, bringing many regime activities to a standstill, an analysis by the Finance Ministry's Accountant General has found. I-24 News. A survey released shows that more than 250,000 Israeli households have fallen below the poverty line since the start of the lockdown responses to the pandemic, an increase of almost 50%. According to the welfare charity Lated, which also provides meal services throughout Israel, approximately 3 in 10 Israelis, 29.3%, live in poverty, which equates to 850,000 households. That figure represents more than a 9% year-on-year increase, 20.1%. The Jerusalem Post. Some 63% of Israelis plan on being vaccinated against the coronavirus, but only 24% of them plan on getting the vaccine immediately, a new poll published by Ynet News has found. One possible explanation for the relatively low number of Israelis willing to be vaccinated immediately is the public's opinion of the safety of the vaccine. Some 23% of Israelis don't know if the vaccine is safe, 17% think it is not safe, and 6% are sure it is not safe, according to the Ynet poll.